our esteemed stakeholders, the Secretariat and consultants, I say a very good morning to you all. And I'd like to also thank you for yesterday. The commitment you have shown yesterday is unprecedented. We started early, but we left very late because of the commitment and determination you have all exhibited yesterday. So I just want to give a quick, maybe synopsis of what we are expected to do today as we settle into different syndicate groups. Group 1, as we are aware, is more or less a policy direction group to look at the effectiveness or otherwise of the privatization. It's a big question to digest the pros and cons, where we got it wrong from the beginning, what we need to do going forward. Just straightforward. What do we need to do going forward? If you could recall yesterday, there are certain revelations, even though are known facts, that the committee is aware of the 60% stake of the investors and 40% stakes of the public. And the BPE explained in detail that a stopgap approach or decision, and it's expected that when the investors were able to stabilize the discourse, then the remaining 40% can go for public offer. To indemnify the public from loss, that's why the PPE could not do that. So now at present, what do we do going forward? We also identify the very bitter fact that those investors ab initio may not have been the best for the job, but because of certain exigencies and considerations, they found themselves there. So now how do we do? Do we go into the question of recapitalization? No, I don't want to give you a maybe expo, but I believe the chairman, members, and the issue from the exclusive legislative list to the concurrent legislative list, giving way for the state actors now to participate in generation, distribution, and of course, even transmission. So how do we create an atmosphere where coordination, domestication, cooperation, and synergy can be built so that the market, the whole sector will not suffer by way of this laudable amendment? Group 3 is on the major issue: generation, transmission, distribution challenges. Number of times stakeholders from this respective sub-sector appeared before the committee and they have stated their challenges. Now let's look at those challenges and propose solution. That's what is expected of that group. They should be very sincere with their situation. Let's know what the challenge is and let's holistically work towards addressing them, possibly. Group 4, liquidity and tariff related challenges. We talk about technical, commercial loss and other losses that are inherent in the sector. So what do we do to mitigate this or to even avoid this? It's a very hard to take a decision, I'm sure, that will come from this group, because definitely the government cannot continue this way. It's certainly unsustainable. There's no how the government will continue payment of shortfalls or subsidy and making interventions while NBET continue to issue 30% to 35% payment to GENCOs and then carry over 65% as debt. That is not sustainable. We have to look at that thoroughly, in-depthly, and proper solution. Group 5, the Gas for Power question and the Petroleum Industry Act. They go together. The Petroleum Industry Act provides for the gas for critical national sector, like the power sector. So how do we make gas available? There are some players within the industry that are almost strangulated for not having enough gas to operate. Somebody just confirmed to me that throughout this year he only got gas for 15 days. So tell me, how will the sector survive? You really have to look thoroughly through proper solution and a way forward. Group 6, legal and regulatory framework audit. Certainly, there's no act that can be said to be perfect. So we look at the Electricity Act 2023. We also look at the PIA as it relates to the power sector and see what we can do. Identify the gaps and the lacunas for possible further legislative action or any other regulation. There are proposals for this consumer right, whatever, all those are noted. So we look at the possibility of maybe coming up with, agencies, commissions that will safeguard and further strengthen the viability of the sector. The hydro issue is also part of it. I believe the representative of the Federal Ministry of Water Resources Please, can we be orderly so that we continue? The representative of the Ministry of Water Resources, I believe, should be part of this group because like we are underutilizing our water resource and something needs to be done. We expect the Ministry of Water Resources to avail this group with the details of the total number of dams we have and their capacities and even prospective site for dams for mini grids, if possible. Synergy and collaboration with subnationals and other stakeholders. Without synergy between stakeholders, there's no how we can ever get it right. So how do we do interaction of this nature that brings the National Assembly, the executive, the stakeholders in the industry together will go a long way in further shaping the stability of the sector going forward. And then group 8, safety, energy, captive power. Please add captive power. These are mini grids into this group. I have not seen it here. Group 8, add captive power or mini grids. Yes. Energy, captive power, mini grid, alternative power, and consumer protection, not consumer production, consumer protection. So he should give input here and that's all. The clerk, please. You can share the brochure. The brochure contains some of the guidelines for the groups, and in fact even the term of reference. But you can see that in the brochure we have 4 groups, but we split it into 8 so that at least you can work easily and come up with a report. So it contains virtually everything there. So please, let every group have that brochure, and then they can check the term of reference and guidelines that is captured in the brochure. Thank you very much. Oops.
Way forward.
Imo State Electricity Regulatory Commission, Ibadan Electricity Regulatory.
And what we have in our presentation is effectiveness or otherwise of privatization. And
sorry, Chairman. Can I have a copy of your report, please?
Sir?
A copy of what you are reading, your report. Already submitted?
Please.
Chairman. We had various stakeholders cutting across the private sector, the regulators, and of course reps of the GENCOs and the DISCOs. We came up with the following, which our report is in 3 segments. We came up with the benefit and partial achievements since the privatization. We came up with the challenges, and of course, the recommendation and solution to what we were able to. We agreed that the privatization had seen some positive effectiveness. Nevertheless, we still created rooms. We recognized the challenges, and we created room for recommendation and solutions. But we'll start with what we labeled as the core benefits and intent and partial achieved by the power sector privatizations. 1, we said infrastructural funding. Privatization shifted the massive financial requirements from upgrading power infrastructure from government to private entities. Increased grid inputs, that's bonding into the unbundling of GENCOs, led to immediate increase in overall installed capacity of power generation compared to privatization era. Reduced direct funding, no budgetary allocation for maintenance, operations, or networks distribution by government. We also agreed that it improved the tax revenue for government. Privatization opened opportunities for government to collect more taxes from corporate and other taxes. There was eradication of bureaucracy and political interference. Now independent management. Regulatory oversight. Loss reduction from 50% to about 34.9%. Prudent consumption. Introduction of cost-effective e-pricing encouraged consumers to manage their electricity usage more efficiently and minimize system energy wastage. Now, some of the challenges that's impacting the electric supply. Inadequate infrastructure. Depleted transmission networks limits the wheeling capacity of power, resulting in frequent grid collapse and stranded power. DISCOs also lack the equipment to efficiently route power even when it is generated. Liquidity and tariff shortfalls. The multi-year tariff order, MYTO, historically sets power rates below actual cost of generation, leading to massive revenue shortfalls. The sector relies heavily on government subsidies to stay afloat. Gas supply constraint. The terminal power plant, which accounts for bulk of national generation, frequently faces gas shortage due to supply bottlenecks, vandalism, and the fact that gas supplies prioritize international markets or industrial off-takers over local generation companies. High technical and commercial losses. A large percentage of generated power is lost due to poor infrastructure or stolen through energy bypass and illegal connection. Furthermore, a significant number of consumers remain unmetered, leading to estimates billion disputes and mass payments of bills. Lack of alignment on policy and regulation. Recommended solutions. Rehabilitation of transmission capacity. This involves replacing the absolute equipment and completing supervisory control data acquisition network for better monitoring, ensuring financial liquidity and cost-reflective tariffs, protect critical and infrastructure. Curbing frequent grid collapse requires stronger collaboration between security agencies, government, local host communities to prevent vandalism and sabotage of transmission lines, synergy and collaboration between all stakeholders. In all, what the group came up with is that privatization has been effective, comparing from where we are coming from when government had full control over power. And we also recommending that government involvement should be less so that it could be more effective and there could be a total subsidy removal in the electricity, the power sector, so that there could be a full privatization and it could be more effective from where we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, your last recommendation that you just mentioned.
It's just coining.
I understand. It must be written in black.
Okay, all right, we'll do that. Secretariat, please take note.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, sir.
Group B.
And the stakeholders invited. Group 2 will have its presentation on two falls, actually. While I was presiding, I had to leave for another assignment. So Honorable Dr. Billy took over chair. So it's going to be on two falls. I will present, what I chaired, and it's actually on 3 issues. Generally, the group assignment is on policy and reform issues and future of the regulated power sector. We have about 13 agencies, and that tells you how the discussion went, actually. Very tough, to be frank. Now, at the end of that discussion, the group came up with the following. Like I said, I'm going to present what I chaired while I was at that meeting, and Honorable Dr. Billy will do that. One, we look at the issue of the Electricity Act 2023, which, provides or which pave way for the exclusive nature to the existing concurrent list, and which allow for decentralization of power sector. A presentation recently, was made that power is actually capital intensive. But the committee believed that our power generation, the states can be strengthened with a view to, acting on the, or rather implementing the law. In other words, the policy issue should be on strengthening the states to generate power. That is one. Another very, very important issue, normally, that we have inferred, from all the discussions and the presentation is on the issue of liquidity. We believe liquidity gas are two of the major problems. So on the liquidity side, we believe that we can evolve strategies with a view to recovering revenue leakages and at the same time increase revenue. That is two. Another very, very important issue which has to do with MBET is the issue of bilateral contract between the DISCOs and the GENCOs. That clause has not been enforced. And if that has been enforced, we will have somebody to hold accountable when it comes to issue of capacity building or actual capacity building and the liquidity issue generally. So these are the three fundamental issues that I actually presided while I was, acting or rather, chairing the committee. I believe a lot have been discussed.
In your absence.
And Honorable Dr. Billy will now, with your permission, sir.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
But at the end of the day, we'll see you. I will advise you. You combine the two reports together and make it.
Exactly. We are going to harmonize the two reports.
Okay.
And then we pass to the secretariat.
Okay.
And the chairman too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable.
The following positions were agreed upon by Group 2, Policy and Reform Issues and Future of a Deregulated Power Sector with State Electricity Market. 1. The removal of subsidy on electricity. Cost-reflective tariff should be put in place. 2. To allow the Electricity Act 2023 to suffice, where state regulators alongside the state policy makers drive the electricity market, formulate laws and policy guidelines to make the state markets viable. 3. To harmonize agreements between the federal regulators NERC and the state regulators SERC for mutual operations. 4. The establishment of special task force and special courts to address energy theft in every state. 5. Federal and state electricity regulators, that's NERC and SERC, should be allowed to drive the metering schemes. And 6. Banks, INEC, and telecom companies, that's the meter companies, should be allowed in the metering activities, and maps should also be brought on board for case of meter distribution. 7. NAPTIM should organize training for power staff, that's the installers. They have to be trained because after deliberations, we actually found out that they had a shortfall or a deficit of installers of these meters. 8. State electricity regulation should continue because they are closer to the consumers. 9. The use of coal as an alternative source of power should actually be considered. This is because the coal that is found in parts of Nigeria have very low sulfur content and are valuable in commercial quantities. This is to encourage investors in that sector. So, Mr. Chairman and moderators, I think, like the chairman said, all this will be harmonized with the first part of it. So this is for Group 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Guests, good afternoon. My name is Honorable Engineer Mohammed Buba Jajere, PhD. I am the chairman for Group 4. And the the thematic theme for our group is liquidity and tariff challenges in the power sector. Mr. Chairman, honorable colleagues, stakeholders, we sat down and discussed at length over this thematic theme of liquidity and tariff challenges in our power sector. And we were able to come up with 4 areas where we vigorously discussed. And these areas included the tariff methodology, the assumptions, and the transparency in its application. Secondly, we were also able to discuss the tariff increases against the measurable service improvements and network investments in the sector. And thirdly, we were able to discuss the accountability in government interventions. We are aware that government has intervened seriously in the power sector, and what is the accountability in those interventions, and what are the gaps that are there in those interventions. And lastly, we discussed also about the targeted subsidies and the social protection for vulnerable consumers in the sector. By and large, at the end of our discussions, which we have a detailed report that will be submitted to the ad hoc committee later, we were able to come up with some recommendations. And those recommendations included that, 1, there must be effective contracts and end-to-end securitization or guarantees across for all contracts across board. Secondly, we must ensure a strict market discipline in the sector, because we noticed that the DROs and the MROs were not fully enforced from 2019 to date. Thirdly, the federal government must be able to offset previous subsidy obligations and legacy debts between 2015 and 2026. Number 4, we should be able to unearth the original design of the value chain and implement it accordingly. Because in the initial design, NBET and NEMCO were supposed to be there, temporarily. Over time, over a period of time, they are supposed to have exited. But up till now, they are still within the value chain. This has to be revisited and see how the original design of this system can be implemented. And number 5, we notice that there is the need for adequate metering, and a workable network within the system. There is also the need for us to train installers of meters, because we've noticed that metering is a key factor, in the liquidity and tariff challenges. We're also able to come up with the need to remove subsidy completely and consider the implementation of the PCAF for vulnerable persons in different states of the Federation. We've noticed that subsidy is a very, very, very critical problem, bedeviling the power sector. So we were able to ask questions, and it was unanimously agreed that if subsidy is removed in the power sector, most of these problems will be solved. And it is part of our recommendation that the federal government should remove subsidy in the electricity sector, just the way they removed subsidy in petroleum products. This may not go down well with so many Nigerians, but it is a fact. And then lastly, we are suggesting that the discourse has to be recapitalized, for them to be able to upgrade, their networks and provide services to Nigerians. With this, Mr. Chairman, the report is on its way. They are still typing the report. So many things have been captured within the report, which I cannot mention here. But this is an overview and a summary of our discussions this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. Time for the billions and bits.
Of course, coordinator of this session.
Thank you.
My name is Victor Afamogene, Obaru Federal Constituency, and the lead for Group 5 that examined the gas for power question and the Petroleum Industry Act. In our report, you would see all the stakeholders that took part in the deliberations. Essentially, electricity is like Siberia. Everybody knows where it is, but none is willing to go there. We all seem to know what the problems are in the power sector. But I don't know why finding solutions is a problem. So I thank the chair of this ad-hoc committee for this initiative. Our session goal basically was to probe why Nigeria, a gas-rich nation, cannot sustain reliable gas supply to its various power plants. We also to examine and establish whether the PIA as created has actually, proven to be the framework to fix this, or has introduced new complications. We examined all of this, and let me hasten to say that some of the issues are interrelated. For instance, my colleague who made the last presentation talked about metering. For us, looking at the gas component, gas will not transform itself into any megawatts of electricity. It goes through a whole process. So we examined some of those, including the need for up to 98% metering requirement. But let me go into our bridge report as produced. But first, I wish to note the absence of notable players in the sector like the TCN, Transmission Company of Nigeria, and NGIC, the Nigerian Gas Infrastructure Company, both of which are key to looking at the gas component. They were not at the session. Their absence is noted, but I wish to point out that questions directed at both organizations remain unanswered and will be issued as formal written demands. Overview of our discussions. Group 5 examined Nigeria's chronic gas-to-power supply failure across 3 sessions, probing gas producers, suppliers, regulators, and IPPs on performance, pricing compliance, and as well as accountability. Stakeholders present, including the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, SEPLAT, NMPC, NEPL, Shell, Chevron, Pacific Energy, Renaissance, Ibon Power. The key issues that dominated our deliberations include, but are not limited to, the domestic base price, which we observed is being breached by multiple gas suppliers, as costs were passed through to consumers via embeds PPA without regulatory consequence. The TCN was identified across sessions as a critical bottleneck. The entire sector is constrained by a transmission network that cannot evacuate every available generation. TCN did not attend this session as pointed out and has not provided the committee with its capital expenditure record against when put vis-a-vis capacity added since 2007. The take-or-pay PPA structure was widely criticized as a mechanism that guarantees payments to generators regardless of actual output, while discos, who collect the revenue, to the greater majority of members of the committee, remain the weakest link in the value chain. The PIA, Petroleum Industry Act 2021, grants regulators power to impose domestic gas delivery obligations, but enforcement has been effectively absent. NMDPRA and NUPRC could not point to a single sanction issued for domestic-based price non-compliance or DGDO breach. For a subnational, Ibom Power noted that gas in Akwa Ibom State is available but cannot be converted to usable supply, pointing to a local infrastructure access gap rather than a production shortage. Key recommendations: structural/ownership reform. TCN ownership, it was suggested, should be divested. Gencos and Discos must be made shareholders in a privatized TCN so that those who depend on transmission have a stake in its performance. Electricity infrastructure should be designated a national asset by law instead of just a national resource, as it currently is assumed. And this will make tampering with it to attract criminal liability enforceable by the state and not merely civil action by DISCOs. License enforcement. The unbundling contract law stipulated that non-performing DISCOs should have their licenses revoked after 5 years. Regrettably, 13 years have passed with no single occasion of such enforcement. The National Assembly ought to therefore compel immediate enforcement of this provision. No further extension, no further forbearance. Gas infrastructure. It is our recommendation that we should expand gas processing and compression facilities through mandated investment conditions attached to upstream licenses. That we should also promote public-private partnership for gas pipeline and compression infrastructure financing, as well as enact laws requiring corrective and preventive maintenance schedules for all gas-to-power infrastructure with regulatory audit rights. Policy recommendations for legislative action. Market and revenue. It is part of our recommendation that we should strengthen tariff reforms tied to verifiable and verified service delivery. Enhance revenue collection efficiency across DISCOs. Establish a credible sovereign-backed payment security mechanism. Create a gas stabilization fund to cushion tariff volatility. Regulatory coordination. It is the suggestion of the group that we create a formal coordination mechanism between petroleum and power sector regulators. That we should harmonize policies affecting gas supply and electricity generation. And that NEC, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, should develop a transparent, cost-reflective pricing structure for gas to power, gas supply and infrastructure. It is also the recommendation that we should enforce domestic-based price compliance and that GACN to publish quarterly domestic-based price adherence register. We should also encourage long-term gas supply contracts with enforceable domestic priority clauses, as well as mandate domestic gas allocation for power generation before export. It is our further recommendation that we should ensure transparent implementation of all fiscal incentives for gas to power, security and governance. We should enhance protection of critical gas and power infrastructure, such that pipeline vandalism would attract federal criminal liability. We also recommend that TCN be privatized with Gencos and DISCOs as mandatory shareholders, as well as enforce the 5-year non-performance DISCO license revocation clause immediately. This is an abridged excerpt from our report, and the fuller report will come soon afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, let's move forward.
Our main report will come later. I will just give you a synopsis of what we have done. So, First of all, the group looked at the legal and regulatory framework of what is presently in existence. And we identified the gaps in existing legal and regulatory framework and came up with some proposals of what we feel, when done, it will help to make the industry more effective. Now, the key issues identified are as follows. There's jurisdiction interpretation on who is in charge of licensing between NEC and the state regulatory bodies. Of course, this should be expected. When there's a new law, there's always issues of interpretation. Each person or group will want to interpret the law as they deem fit, as it will enable them to expand their jurisdiction or hold on to whatever they are having. The discourse seem to want NEC to continue in perpetuity in regulation, while the state distribution companies prefer that the states should be the ones to regulate the operations of electricity distribution within the states. Looking at the Electricity Act as it is now, it is envisaged that actually the states should regulate. There's little issues here and there in few states between the discourse that operates there and the state's licensing authority. So we looked at that, so we'll come to the solution, but these are some of the things we looked at. Then we also looked at the issue of tariff. What is the methodology of determining these tariffs? You know, there's a general saying that he who plays the piper dictates the tone. If the states are to regulate operation within their states, to what extent can they also regulate the tariff that is paid within their states? Because there's a mirage of issues here. Even when the states are regulating, they are still taking power, at least for now, from the national grid, which is produced outside their states. Which national grid and the powers are, that are fed into the national grid are produced from outside their states. So how are they now supposed to determine tariff? So a case study of what happened in Enugu State was actually looked into. And we are going to also come up with what we felt is a way to frame the regulation so that this can be resolved. Then we looked at the time frame between the handover by NEC to the state regulatory body. The law as it is says 6 months after when the state indicates their readiness. But practice have shown that 6 months have not been enough for any of the states so far to be able to complete all the necessary processes. So what NEC have been doing is immediately they give them the notice 6 months after the hands off, even when the states have not been able to put everything in place. So we are saying that that policy needs to be tinkered so that it will not be a case of time frame alone. There should be key benchmarks that have to be put in place so that it is when the states have ticked all those benchmarks that NEC should hand over completely our hands off. And also, we are looking at that area to have the KPS in place that will determine the handover date and not just it. They are operating with 11 discos and it has not been easy. They are operating with give and take fewer than 20 gas GENCOs. So when you now have 36 GENCOs, 36 DISCOs, and with different kinds of regulatory regulations going on, how will TCN be able to cope? So we're looking at decentralizing TCN into 6 geopolitical entities, so that each entity can take care of the states within its geopolitical zone. That way, the issue of maintenance, the issue of right of way, the issue of so many things that burden TCN can be decentralized and others be able to possibly deal with TCN that is centralized in Abuja. Now, when you are talking about issue of vandalization, most of these TCN infrastructure are deeply in the hinterlands. Having one central body in Abuja, being able to monitor infrastructure in Ogun State, or infrastructure in Cross River State, or infrastructure in Zamfara, is difficult. But if you try to decentralize it and have them in the 6 geopolitical zones, it will be easier for the states to put resources together and be able to work more effectively with a transmission network that is within their geopolitical zone. Now, we looked at the issue of customer protection. You see, when we say customer protection, it looks too far. The Igbos have this saying that when you talk about the butos, it looks as if it is very far, but when you put your hand behind, you touch it. So each and every one of us here is a consumer. Even the operators of the disco are consumers. The operators of GENCOs are consumers. The GASCOs are consumers. So when we are looking at consumers, we shouldn't be looking at Mr. Okore alone. We are all consumers. I happen to be close to somebody that operates a disco. And I've been in his house severally when light went off. And he turns on his generator. But he owns just a disco. So he's a consumer. Now, you may be a director in a disco that is in Ibadan. Meanwhile, you have a house in Abuja. When in your house in Abuja, you're a consumer. Because that your disco in Ibadan does not have license to operate in Abuja or in Lagos where you have a home. You may be an owner of a GENCO, but that your GENCO cannot give light directly to your house. You must be connected in your house through a disco. So you are also a customer. So when we look at this issue of customer, we will try to neglect it, but all of us are customers. So we are talking about the interests of over 220 million Nigerians, including the rich, the poor, and the middle class. All of us are customers. So the issue of customer protection should be taken seriously. But then, we tried to look at having a customer protection agency. But after putting it on the table and analyzing it, we decided not to recommend it. Because we are in an era where there's decentralization of the electricity market. So why create a central customer protection agency again? If we are looking at NEC giving out their powers to the state regulatory agencies, why create another giant again in the center? If we are recommending that TCNs should be decentralized, why create a central customer protection agency again? So we're looking at that, so we'll come to the recommendation on that. But the issue of customer protection is very, very important and should not be overlooked as an alluta, like one of our stakeholders said yesterday, that is alluta. It's not alluta. is an issue of survival for each and every one of us, including the visitors that come to Nigeria. Yesterday, day before yesterday, while we were in this hotel, that is a flagship hotel in Nigeria, that attracts visitors from all over the world that come to Nigeria, Eco Hotel and Suites is one of the flagship hotels. But we know how many times that the light has gone off here. It is not a good image to the country. So you bring your business partner and they come here, they take light left, right, and center. It's not giving a good image. Even in our airports, lights are taken. It's not a good image. In hospitals, lights are taken, and facilities cannot work well, and patients that are on equipment that are hooked up to provision of electricity do not survive. Most times when lights go off, we lose our loved ones, and it can happen to anybody at any time. So customer protection is important. We looked at the PIA and how it affects the power industry, especially when it comes to gas. And we said that PIA is mostly commercialized, looking at the profit side. Of course, the domestic gas provision is there, but we've also seen that the gascos are finding it easier not to adhere to that because they believe that the GENCOs are not paying them. So because of that, they starve the GENCOs of gas, and because we've also provided a lacuna that can also be used to service other, the domestic gas arrangement can also be used for fertilizer, can be used for domestic gas and other stuff. The gascos hide on that and sell to these other entities instead of selling to the GENCOs. So, and moreover, that most times that the agreement that have been signed by the gascos with the GENCOs, when these GENCOs do not operate for one reason or the others, the gascos sell those gas to other entities.
You have less than 2
So with all this, we came up with some recommendations.
Please, hurry up.
Our recommendation is that to avoid most of these problems, there have to be liquidity in the system. And the liquidity in the system can only be guaranteed when customers pay what they call cost-reflective tariff. But in determining this cost-reflective tariff, all the stakeholders should be consulted, including the consumers, to determine the price, not only the NEC. And to be able to unlock every household or users of power should be metered.
Moderator, please moderate because please. Thank you.
Honorable, please, your time.
Okay, there are more to say, but we will submit a detailed to the committee that have all the other recommendations.
Better.
Thank you.
To my dear colleague.
House of Rep members seated, stakeholders present. My name is Engineer Ifeoluwa Kolade, and I'm standing in for Honorable Jeremiah, Group 7. Okay, we discussed the synergy and the collaboration with subnationals and other stakeholders in our group. We talked about the enactment of the Electricity Act of 2023 that enabled the subnationals to generate, that decentralized electricity governance and allowed subnationals to generate, distribute, and transmit the energy within their states. And under the deliberations were guided by 5 thematic areas. We talked about the regulatory and technical alignment, institutional synergy, inter-agency grid operations, public-private partnerships, and the role of local communities and consumers. And our discussions were directed towards identifying collaborative mechanisms that will resolve the occurring grid failures, improving metering and electricity service delivery, and unlocking localized and international energy investment. As we all know that for any project or program to be effective, there has to be collaborations. The teamwork and collaborations cannot be overemphasized. And so under the institutional synergy, we talked about having permanent inter-regulatory coordination platform through which regulatory agencies, the NEC, and for example, in Lagos State, we have the LASEC, would and operators can jointly review policies, regulations, and implementation strategies before adoption. We further talked about the technical alignment, and we all know that for any sector to effectively regulate its sector, it must have ample knowledge of that sector. And so we talked about professional development within the officers and officials of each of these regulatory bodies, capacity building for regulators, operators, sub-national institutions, and technical personnel across the industry. We also talked about the institutional synergy. And under this institutional synergy, we realized that all of these regulatory bodies work in silos. And so there has to be regular institutional engagement, information sharing, and coordinated planning among agencies to ensure seamless implementation of the sector reforms. In order for these subnationals to be able to...
2 more minutes.
Okay, sorry. Let me just go on to our key recommendations that we will submit a more detailed report. Okay, so we had these following recommendations. A permanent institutional coordination platform should be established to facilitate continuous collaboration among the federal regulators, the subnational regulators, and all electricity sector institutions. There has to be joint technical training programs, and capacity building initiatives should be institutionalized for regulators. We talked about the public-private partnership frameworks where our PPAs should be strengthened through transparent procurement processes, rigorous due diligence and performance-based accountability. Then the government, we talked about data-driven, we talked about regional resource optimization strategies where the natural resources that are available in all of these regions are being harnessed for renewables integration into the grid. And in conclusion, the group talked about that sustainable reform of the Nigerian electricity sector cannot be achieved through isolated institutional efforts. Rather, success depends on sustained synergy and collaboration among federal and subnational governments. I would also like to, sorry, sir, 1 minute, talk about how...
2 seconds. Please, make some submission. Please submit your...
Okay, we'll submit
thank you.
report.
My dear colleagues, we just have 2 more chairmen to deliver their reports or make their submission.
The Group 3 considered the generation, transmission, and distribution challenges and way forward. During our discussion, we talked about capacity.
You have just 3 minutes.
Yes,
3 minutes.
capacity.
No, time.
And on this, we recommended bilateral stroke and investment contracts among the GENCOs, the transmission, and the distribution. So this to ensure that whatever is generated is taken and distributed. So that. Then 2, we also realize that there's need to review the act because we talk of the vandalization and the thefts of energy. On this, we are recommending the need to review the act to provide for the establishment of a special court and a stronger punishment for the vandals so that the industry will be protected and the investment of the investors will be protected. 3, we also talked about the ABA models, that is encouraging private sector and the state to establish small plants that will provide for the cluster, like ABA model. This one, if you have it in all the states, like 100 megawatts in each state, that will be like 3,000, which will reduce the pressure on the grid. So we are encouraging, we recommend that we should encourage private investors to do that. We also agreed or suggested that NAC
1 more minute.
and NISO should put in place adequate ancillary services to to guarantee network. So, then, metering problem, we know is a major problem. And we realize that meter in Nigeria is too costly. They said meter in other parts, like $10 you can get meter. Why is it? So we now suggested that the metering should be liberalized. So there should be a standard, but we should liberalize the issue of metering.
Thank you so much.
So we have other anything, but
Submit it.
so okay, thank you very much.
Black and white. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear colleagues, we have just one group.
Our group looked at safety, energy, captive power to mini grid, alternative power, and consumer protection thematic. So the area group. We looked at so many things, but for want of time, let me just come to our recommendations.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
We recommended that there should be strict enforcement, poor funding of MDAs that are to perform certain functions for power sector, the Consumer Protection Council National Orientation Agency, pull out consumer protection from an ERC. We also looked at the fact that NERC carried out pilot stakeholders interactive sections in 3 states in Nigeria: Imo, Edo, Akwa Ibom, and Delta states. The maintenance of electricity line be done effectively. That there is need to collaborate between NEMSA and certified associations, e.g., LECAN and registered CSOs, on safety and all installations, and ensure that uncertified electricians are trained and certified. So many recommendations here, but the last but not the least is that public education, discourse to run safe use of power components in local languages, tech COs, poisoning loads, limits, and items.
Just 2 minutes.
So we have our reports ready. We will submit it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Chairman, my dear colleagues, they've all made their beautiful submission, and I want to assure you, for those who are to harmonize their reports, they will do that, and of course, all of them will submit in hard copy to the chairman of the committee. I so much thank you. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for this opportunity, and I wish all of us safe journey to our various destinations. Thank you so much.
Sure, our beloved country, Nigeria, will be proud of this good work you've done. It's very difficult to say the truth, but I think this is the best time we have, and no other, that we'll sit, interact, bring out issues, and tell ourselves the home truths. The time to make a better reform in the power sector is now. Inshallah, God will lead us through. At this juncture, honorable colleagues, the panelists, the discussants, I can say the leaders of the various groups, thank you so much. You can take your leave, and I want to announce that it's time to go for lunch. When we resume, we are going to have the communique. I'd like to invite Honorable Victor Afam Ogene to read out the content of the communique.